Welcome, everyone, to the Obligations of Memory podcast from the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group on Facebook and YouTube. I'm Jeffrey Geisner, and I'm honored to be with my friend, Fred Zaidman from Los Angeles. Fred, I met several years ago when he produced a film that was quite an amazing journey for myself because it sort of matched up with some of the things that I've been working on. The film was The Presence of Their Absence. It was directed by two-time Emmy winner Donna Kanter, also from LA. And it really gave me a closer connection to Fred, and we've been friends virtually ever since. And so I've invited Fred today to tell us a little bit about his personal story, start with his family. Both his parents were Holocaust survivors. So why don't we start there, Fred, and give a little bit of a background on the pre-war days of your parents and what camps they were, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. One correction, Jeffrey. I did not produce the documentary. Donna Kanter did. I was the subject of that documentary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the question is my parents before the war and
then what they did in what camps they were and so on.
Oh, sure. My mother was born in Dąbrowa Górnicza, and my father born in Radomsko, which is north of Częstochowa, but as a young boy moved to Będzin, which is right on the border of Dąbrowa Górnicza. They never met each other. They didn't know each other before the Holocaust, but they met each other after being liberated at Bergen-Belsen. And shortly after the liberation, they married, and then they stayed in Bergen-Belsen for 5 years. And in 1947, my brother was born. Prior to the Holocaust, I really don't know too much about either family. You know, they never shared anything or very little about their life, their family and members and so on.
So you said your brother was born in 47. When were you born?
I was born in 1954, February 17, and I'm the first to be born in the United States.
So let's go back a little bit. How did your parents make their way from Bergen-Belsen to through a DP camp? Obviously, you may know something about that. And then how did they make their way did they go to the United States directly from Europe, or did they make another stop somewhere else?
No, well, yes. First, I think it's important to say that they were in the Bergen-Belsen DP camp for almost 5 years. Mm. They had no place to go, evidently. I don't know why they didn't go to Israel or why they didn't go to Australia, whatever. I don't know that story. But my father found an uncle living here in Los Angeles. And he had left Poland prior to the Holocaust, years before. And he was sent here by his family, by his parents and sisters and such, just to get out of Poland. And so he sponsored my parents to come to Los Angeles. They entered the United States through New Orleans. And I'm not sure how long they stayed in New Orleans, and I assume a very short time. And then they traveled to Los Angeles. They were picked up by my uncle, Abe Durnsfeig, and his family. And they already had a apartment set up for my parents in Boyle Heights, which became like the mecca of survivors coming in from Europe.
Okay, so so you were born shortly after they came, I guess. In what year did they come?
Well, they came in 1950, September 1950. I was born in February in 1954. So it was 4 years.
Okay. And so how did they make their way? They didn't speak English, obviously. And what was
Well,
their, how did they make their way? What were their occupations? Were your mother stay at home with you too?
right, right. Well, my mother knew many languages, 6 or 7 languages, and she picked up Esperanza very easily, and English. She was pretty smart with language. My father, I guess it took some time, but they were able to get around because they were in a Jewish neighborhood
Mhm.
community. Uh, Now, I was born in '54, and I think it's important to say that after I was born, my mother had problems, psychological problems, and I was given up for to a foster family.
Hmm.
I think approximately 6 to 9 months, something like that. And she couldn't handle another a baby. My brother was already almost 7 years old, and so I was sent somewhere west of West Los Angeles and stayed with a family. And
Was it a Jewish family?
that I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know. Now I just learned this last week. My brother told me the story. I mean, it was just like my
Wow.
parents didn't. Yeah, my parents didn't discuss that part. I do remember my mother threatened me to take me back to the foster care, because I wasn't behaving. And
Wow.
I thought she was joking. I didn't know, but it wasn't a joke. So a Wonder family took me in, and my brother says that they would go visit me once or twice a week. And then when my mother healed and was ready to take on the responsibility, I went back. I went
Now,
to the family.
do you think that your mother was suffering from Holocaust trauma?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt. She suffered from that trauma for many, many years. And growing up, I remember when I was very, very young, she I heard her crying uh, in her bedroom, talking on the phone, crying to friends, crying to my father that she wanted to commit suicide. She didn't want to live anymore. She couldn't handle life, and I didn't know exactly what was going on. I just knew my mother was distressed. Of course, later on, I understood what she was going through.
What
Uh,
kind of relationship did you have with your parents when you were growing up? Let's say you obviously you don't remember something beyond maybe earlier than 4 years old, but when you started to remember things, how was your
right.
relationship with your parents?
It wasn't exactly Ozzie and Harriet. Uh, it was kind of distant in that they were involved in trying to make a new life here in America. And so I don't think they had much, especially my father, parenting skills. My mother, being the eldest of 6 siblings, she did, but she had her issues. And although they were very loving, no, I never had any doubt about their love and dedication. They weren't the type to, help out with schoolwork or, uh, take me on trips to various places that would give me experiences. My mother was pretty kept me on a leash growing up.
And
Uh,
would your brother say the same thing, or was it a different relationship with your brother?
it was different with my brother. It was different. Uh, my brother, it was more extroverted, and he pretty much he wanted to be more independent, and he was. But he was, I considered, the favorite between the two of us. And I understand that because he was there in Bergen-Belsen, and he was the first, and I was considered by my mother to be the Americana, you know. And I remember a few times she would say the Americana stinker. So okay, so it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. So I didn't have the kind of growing up that most Americans had. even second generation.
Mhm. So how did you make your way growing up? Did you play sports? Did you
Yeah,
enjoy school or trades? Did you go to the university? Tell us a little bit about your life after
yeah.
you got on your own a little bit.
Well, when I was very, very young, sports became natural, and it gave me an identity. I was going to a yeshiva when I was young. In the third grade, they figured out that the yeshiva wasn't for me, and so my mother took me to a public school in the third grade, and that's when I started to flourish. I felt more part of society, more Americanized. I wasn't kept in a shell. And sports really saved my life. It was very natural for me.
Which sports were you?
Natural athlete. I'm sorry?
Which sports were you inclined to?
Which sport? Baseball, basketball, and football.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so that opened up my social activities, and I made a lot of friends, through sports. As I got older, sports was still very dominant, and that's something that I love and still do.
And did you go to college through sports scholarships, or how?
No, I didn't. No, that I didn't. And the reason is, and part of that is, I believe, it's part of the transfer trauma
Mhm.
that is being addressed nowadays. In that I really didn't have support, home support or support from anybody, and so I wasn't pushed, I wasn't guided, or anything like that. And I was sort of lost in a way where I couldn't do it for myself. But I went on to junior college, Santa Monica College, and from there, I decided that going into a business was better off for me, so I went into business.
And what kind of business did you go into?
Well, at that time, I went into the office supply business.
What year was this?
1972,
Okay.
73, something like 73, 74.
Right.
Yeah. And I was still going to college at that time. And then I became involved, a part owner in a pharmacy with a couple of my older friends that were pharmacists. They wanted me to join in. And so we had a pharmacy business out in the valley, which was a great experience for me because I was handling the front and the register. And I had to deal with a lot of clients, customers, of all kinds of personalities, characters, issues, and things like that. I thought it was great for me. It brought me out of my shell.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful experience. And from there were other businesses. I was in the shoe business and then lighting business.
Okay. So you're obviously a multi-talented business person. So let's go a little bit. You raised the issue of intergenerational trauma, which many members of the group have, and they seek others like yourself and myself, who I grew up with two survivors. My parents never spoke about the Holocaust at all with me, and I've been on a journey just like you have. We'll cover that in a second, to find out what my parents' roots were. But maybe you can describe some of the trauma that you've managed through and how you've managed through, so other people can benefit from what you've learned and what you've experienced.
Right. I want to I'll start off by saying that I never heard of transfer trauma until as recently as several years ago. Of course, I knew I had anxiety. I had some depression. I had some other issues. I didn't connect to transfer trauma, and when I became aware of it, it all makes sense. Everything fell into place. That yes, I did inherited these issues from my parents. My mother crying, being depressed, helpless, that kind of thing. And I think a lot of us, other second generations, probably feel the same. I felt I was the only one that, were having these issues. That's why I became kind of like feeling sorry for myself, alone, and that kind of thing. But once I realized that there were others and there was a reason for it, then that was kind of lifting.
Mhm.
I'm sorry for the thundering.
That's okay. And so I want to kind of jump ahead. I know your story well, but what you're talking about right now, I remember a scene in the film, The Absence of the Presence, where you met Stephen Reese in Atlanta, and Stephen is a minister.
Right.
And Stephen, in many scenes, challenged you to move forward. And I'm wondering if Steve became the surrogate for you in helping you over your trauma, and that some of your hesitation may have been a challenge that Stephen helped you with. So am I right? Am I wrong?
Well, Stephen prepared me for
Maybe
the trip.
you can give our audience who Stephen is and what he's been doing for you.
Okay. He's a doctor now, doctor of philosophy. He just received his doctorship. Stephen Reese is the president of an organization he started called the Matzevah Foundation. And the foundation goal is to go to Poland and to restore Jewish cemeteries that have been neglected for decades and decades. And there are approximately 1,200 cemeteries in Poland. The overwhelming majority have been neglected. And if anyone who's been there, you'll see that the grass, the weeds are wild. A lot of the Matzevah stones are covered, they're cracked, they're marred. And so
can I ask you, for our audience, you say this Matzevah stones. Tell the audience what Matzevah means.
Matzevah, it's a headstone.
Okay.
Okay, it's a headstone written in Yiddish. And so Stephen's organization, mostly non-Jews, go to Poland and to clean up these cemeteries. And at the same time, his goal is to reconcile, have a reconciliation of Poles and Jews, and that we can understand each other and move forward. And that's one of most impressive things that Stephen is doing. And it's a tug of war issue, because a lot of Jews don't want to go to Poland for the obvious reasons, so there's always this prejudice against the present day Poles. I do remember, and this is related, that I asked my father one time, "Do you hate the Germans or more than the Poles?" And I expect him to say, "Yeah." And he says, "No, I hated the Poles a lot more." And he was emphatic about it. So, and I understood later on that growing up, there was a lot of abuse and anti-Semitism that he experienced, the same with my mother. So nowadays, when it's a new generation. When I went to Poland, I discovered that.
When was that? Just to put some time dates on it.
The first time I went to Poland was, I believe it was 2016, 2015, 2016. And I went there with a chip on my shoulder. I was going to go there. I was going to perhaps get in fights. I wasn't going to take any crap from any Pole. I had a lot of animosity. I had some revenge on my mind when I landed. And it wasn't very long that I discovered that there were a lot of Poles who were really friendly, nice, and very helpful in ways that I needed at the time, as far as direction.
Help us understand why you went to Poland.
Well, I went to Poland to do the documentary,
Mhm.
but I always wanted to go to Poland. And prior to meeting Donna Kanter, I had planned to go with my cousin Mary to Poland, uh, and we almost went, but we didn't. And then Donna came into the picture, and Donna was herself. She's probably maybe second generation, excuse me, a third generation survivor, and she wanted to know more about the Holocaust. And so
But
we clicked.
can you tell us what your specific reason for going to Poland, other than you wanted to? Wasn't there a reason that you wanted to go to Poland?
Well, yes. My primary reason was to go where my ancestors once lived, go to the places where my parents had grown up, to kind of fill in the cracks of my past, to experience actually who I am, who my parents were, my grandparents who were killed, and I just wanted to get that feeling and absorb it. That was my primary reason for going. I was telling other people, I just want to breathe the air in Poland and look up at the sky, and so I could relate that to my ancestors. That's a way for me for connecting.
Mhm.
And so that was the primary reason for going.
And was your trip successful?
Yes and no. I was going to say very successful, but it wasn't, because I went there looking for photos of my grandparents, aunts and uncles, and I didn't find it. Although I did find birth certificates of my aunts and uncle, and I found the wedding certificate of my grandparents. And that was a success in its own way, because my grandparents had to signature the birth certificates of my aunts and uncles. So for the first time, I see their handwriting. It's my first connection. It's the only thing I have. And I run my finger over the signatures and over the paper where their hand had to be placed, and the pen, and that was my connection.
Beautiful.
Physical connection to my grandparents, and that meant the world to me.
Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah, and so that was my way of connecting. I still don't know what three of my four grandparents look like. I have no idea what my two aunts and two uncles, my brother's siblings, look like. I did find a lot of information, through my research and going to Poland, and but I still haven't found those photos, so I can't say it was very successful.
Okay, and so how did you connect to Stephen? And I know, having watched the film, the absence of the
Yes.
film, how did you motivate yourself to go with the challenge from Stephen to go to Poland? And then what did you find in Poland when you were both together?
It wasn't difficult to be motivated, because I was already motivated. Mm-hmm. And the connection was made by Donna Kanter. So the documentary was already in procession.
Well, Donna introduced you to Stephen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think, what? I think we both met him for the first time together.
Okay.
She had heard about him through a friend who goes to the temple in Atlanta, and Stephen was teaching about the Holocaust. He was lecturing there. He had classes, and she contacted him and said, "We're coming." And then we had a meeting. The first time I met Stephen, Donna and I walked into one of his classes about teaching the Holocaust to people who really didn't have much of a clue about it, and that was our first meeting. And then after that class, Stephen and I sat down and discussed, what we're doing. Told him what I was doing, and told him my family history. And he explained to me what I was supposed to expect when I got there, and his mission, and so on. And we connected, and we're close friends. I
Mhm.
love the.
I
He's
know
very
that.
sincere.
I
He's
know that.
very sincere and honest in everything he does. And so he got me ready for Poland,
Mhm.
pretty much. And one of the most profound things in my life was shared by Stephen, and it was because of Steve. We were in the Radomsko cemetery where my great grandparents are buried, and aunts, and then a lot of my ancestors are buried in the Radomsko Jewish cemetery.
Where is that located as a
Radomsko is
zine?
approximately 60 miles north of Częstochowa,
Okay.
maybe 100 plus miles from west of Warsaw.
Okay.
So yeah, so it was a fairly large Jewish community there. So we had the coordinates of where my grandparents' graves were, but it was Stephen who found them, and first, and he would wave his hand. Your grandmother's over here, Fred. Come over here. Your grandmother's here. Your grandfather is here. I found your grandfather. And so we went. I went to the Matzevah, to the gravesite, and I didn't know what I was feeling exactly. I couldn't process it. It was all new. And Stephen was talking to me and giving me insight that I'll never forget. He was telling me that my great grandparents never knew about what was going to happen to their children, and that there was a deep, endless, bottomless pit between their life, and the life of their children because of the Holocaust, and that it was basically my responsibility for second generation people to carry on the legacy of their parents, because they couldn't go backwards. They really couldn't go forward without living with the past. And so, and we'll never fill in that crack. It's a gigantic, it's like the Grand Canyon, before and after. So he explained that to me, and he was just very positive. He said, there's not much greater thing than to go back and take care of the grave sites of your ancestors, your great grandparents. My grandparents, there's no way I could visit their grave sites. And they were murdered, they were gassed, and the majority of them, and including my aunts and uncles, half of them went to Auschwitz, the other half went to Treblinka. So there's that big gulf, and Stephen got me he gave me insight to understand it and to move forward, and I truly appreciated him.
I want to ask you a couple of questions because I know we're getting close to the end of our time here.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted to say your movie produced by Donna Kanter came out in 2019, if I'm correct. And that unfortunately smacked into the COVID pandemic for 2 years. But what has been the reaction that people who have seen it and have connected back to you? Can you share it with our audience? Again, the film is The Presence of Their Absence. Film that's on Amazon. You can actually stream it from there. It was done in 2019. For those who are very interested, I can recommend this movie. It is a fabulous, fabulous, poignant movie, and it touched my heart in such deep ways. So I'm sure you're getting a tremendous amount of feedback. So please share some of it.
Well, yes, especially before COVID. Personally, I'm very surprised by the positive reaction to it. Most of the screenings that we attended were full. They were packed. The audience was packed, and the response was absolutely great, especially among the second generations, because they could relate to it, and they had issues as well that they couldn't process all these years. But it had great success as far as reviews, newspaper reviews, and we had questions and answers, and usually the audience stayed past the time allotted for the Q&As, and it was I guess so impressive and inspiring that Yad Vashem and the LA Museum of the Holocaust co-sponsored screenings. It was screened in Atlanta, in New York, in Tel Aviv at the Cinematheque, and which was a thrill for me. I wasn't able to go to the event. Donna was there, and she had to handle everything. But my newly found cousins attended, and my newly found the wonderful, wonderful people. They attended the screening, and that was, that meant the world to me. My cousin told me that the reception was wonderful.
I don't want to give away the film, but people would watch the film because you meet your cousins in Israel who you've never met before.
I met a lot of cousins I've never met before. Wonderful, wonderful people.
So to conclude, what are you doing now? How are you paying it forward? I know you're still involved very closely with the Holocaust Center in Los Angeles. So talk a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, I visit several Holocaust survivors twice a week, maybe a little bit more. It all depends. And they're very important to me. Survivors are a big part of my life and who I am. So I try to visit, volunteer, donate, and do whatever I can to keep the memory alive and give them all the respect that they deserve. I'm also participating with the Cafe Europa group here in Los Angeles that is being run by Jewish Family Services. I go to their group activities once a week. So I stay involved with that. And there's no doubt that the Holocaust survivors mean the world to me.
I know Susan is in charge of the Cafe Europa. I know Susan from the group as well. So you say hello to her from me.
Yeah. She's known as Susie.
Yeah,
we call Susie. Yeah.
So I know this we can talk for hours, but I must ask you, because you are in a unique position to answer the question. You've now watched Russia invade Ukraine. You've watched more than 6 million, I believe, at last count, refugees moving across the border into Poland. Many of them are Jewish, many of them are not. How does this all hit your bones? When you see what's going on in Ukraine, you were in Poland. Tell us about what your gut feeling is as you watch what's happening.
My gut feeling, it's a horrific part of our history that's going on. I'm very happy that Poland has taken in a lot of the Poles, and I'm surprised. I was really surprised, but I'm glad they did. And knowing that the Ukraine in the past during the Holocaust were helping the Nazis, excuse me, destroy the Jews, but I've become with my experience of the documentary and going to Poland, is that it's a whole different generation, and that it's really not fair to tie into Ukraine's the past to the present day Ukraine, especially considering that the leader is Jewish. But it's a horrific thing going on over there, and it hurts. It breaks my heart and makes me very upset that all these people are being slaughtered for absolutely no reason. And there is a correlation between that and what our families during the Holocaust were going through the Shoah. I'm not going to say it's exactly the same because it's not, but there's a lot of similarities. And I feel personally that it's my responsibility and perhaps responsibility of other Jews to help out these people who are being persecuted and killed, because our families were going through the same thing and nobody was helping. So I take it very personal, what's going on, and try to make a difference in my way.
Well, again, I think that's a great way to end the segment. I again wanted to tell people to go to Amazon, watch the movie The Presence of Their Absence with Fred and Donna Kanter, who is the two-time Emmy Award producer and director. And also Stephen Reese plays a part in this film as well. So again, I want to thank you for being my honored guest here and for bringing your story to our family of second generations, third generations, survivors, and fourth generations.
You're very welcome, and it's an honor for me. And Jeffrey, I considered all of us a second generation and third and so on as one family. So I consider you a brother, and and there are, with other people, there are political differences, but, we're all brothers and sisters.
I agree.
And I consider it family.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for listening.